In this video, we're going to take a quick look at OptiTune's REST API. The REST API in OptiTune lets you programmatically access everything that's available in OptiTune. So, for example, if you have your own website or portal and want to integrate it with OptiTune, you can do so with the REST API. Or if you wanted to create a simple tool to automate things in OptiTune like account or group creation, you can do so with the REST API. So how do we get started using the OptiTune REST API? Well, first, you go to My Account, and then scroll down to the bottom. And if you haven't used the REST API before, it's going to show a blank area under the API credentials. So you'll hit Generate. And now you're going to have to copy both of these things because it's going to hide the API password the next time you come back to this page. So we'll copy these things. Put those there. And of course, the next time you go to this page, it's going to hide the password. So it only shows it one time. So the next thing you do is you go to the link over here, or you can put Swagger at the end of this URL. So we'll just go here. And here is the documentation for the REST API. And basically what a REST API is it's a bunch of resources and methods on those resources. And your program or other website can call these things and get information from OptiTune or make changes in OptiTune. So you can see here here's a big list of available resources. You know, computers, deployments, groups, pretty much anything you can manipulate in the OptiTune website you can do through this REST API. So now let's make a quick call. You can call things directly from the help for the REST API. It's kind of confusing, but you'll see once we get started. So for example, with accounts, you can say, let's get all the accounts in the organization. Let's create a new account. Let's delete an account or maybe update an account. So the first method here will say, let's get my account. That is the account that's associated with these API credentials. So we'll hit Get, then go over here and hit Try It Out, and then hit Execute. And now it's going to prompt you for your API credentials in your browser if this is the first time you're running it. So we go here. I'm going to copy and paste these things. So there's the username. That goes there. Here's the password. And that goes there. Sign in. Okay, and so now it's finished it. So we called this URL API v1 accounts me, and it says, okay, here are your account details. So it's a very simple call, and we're the demo user. This is our username, demo user. And this is, now we can see that the API is working. So that's kind of neat, but how do you integrate your program with this? So we've seen that we can use this website to call the API. How do you integrate your program? Well, the idea is with the REST API, it's because it's so large, we need a way to document it such that we can generate clients for other programs to use. So the way this is done is with a Swagger file. And this is the URL for the Swagger file. It's a JSON format, which is a text format. And the interesting thing is if you go to, editor.swagger.io, Swagger, this is SmartBear, they're the company behind the Swagger format. And the Swagger format's a way to document an API such that you can, a user can read it, or you can create client code to call the API in a more easy way. So first of all, if you're using C# or .NET, there's an easy way to generate the client code in Visual Studio. But if you're not, if you're using PHP or Ruby or something else, you can create a client for any REST API if you go here to editor.swagger.io and you go import URL, and then you enter in the OptiTune REST API. And of course, if you have your own self-hosted version of OptiTune, this URL would be different. The domain name would be whatever you're using here. So anyway, so we're going to import the OptiTune REST API into Swagger, the Swagger editor, and it's going to take a while. Okay, there it is. So you see, this is basically the same thing that we have here. It's just presented a little bit differently. But the cool thing about this website is that you can go to here and say generate client. So say I want to generate a client for my PHP website. I hit this. Or say I want to generate PowerShell stubs so that I can call the REST API from a PowerShell script. Well, I can do it here. Or Ruby or whatever else you want. So it's a very cool thing, a very useful website for generating the client libraries. But for this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to create a simple program in Visual Studio to call the REST API to demonstrate how that's done. So I'm going to start up Visual Studio, and this is just the free version of Visual Studio called Visual Studio Community. And let's say, okay, create new project. So you could create a website, you could create a WPF app, you could create whatever you want, but we're going to just create a very simple console app. That is like a command line utility app. So here it is. Let's say console. Oops. We want to create a console app, and we'll use the .NET framework, which is the .NET framework that's included in Windows. So hit that. Hit next. And then it's just, just pick the defaults and pick whatever version of .NET framework you want, usually the latest. I'll set create. Okay, so here is the starter program. And if you're, if you're familiar with Visual Studio, this is pretty basic stuff. But we'll just do a simple, we'll write something to the screen to say, hey, is this thing working? Okay, so it should write hello world to the screen. So now I'm going to run it. Okay, there it is. So it said hello world. Okay, well that's great. But now we'll write another one, another new line there. Okay. So now how do we call? We're going to make this simple program, and we're going to call this REST API. And we're going to say, I want to get my account, create my account details. We're going to call this method. And then we're also going to say, well, let's get a list of all the computers that are registered in OptiTune. And finally, let's also see what each computer's status is. Is it connected to the OptiTune server or not? So that's a simple goal for this, this demonstration. So in order to have your program be able to access the OptiTune REST API, or any REST API for that matter, what you do is you go up to the top of the project, you right click, and then go down here to add, and then go over here to say REST API client. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the OptiTune Swagger URL, which is it's basically this text file that's in JSON format that documents the API and says what all the available resources and methods are. And it's available if you go to the top of this help site, and it's right here. So you just right click this and say copy link address. And this would be different if you're using the self-hosted version of OptiTune. And then you paste it here. And then we'll put, say, OptiTune for our namespace. This will be the namespace of the classes. So it's going to read this URL and then generate a whole bunch of classes for calling the API so that we don't have to, because otherwise the old way of calling it is to say, let's create a web request and fill in these things and then send the request and then parse back what it wrote. This is much easier if we do it this way. So we're going to hit OK. Now it's going to take maybe a minute or 30 seconds, and it'll probably hang like it's generating a lot of stuff. We'll just wait for a second. Okay, I think it's done. Okay, good. So now you can see that it has imported the information from this REST API and created client classes. So how do we get started? What's the entry point? So you can see there's all these different classes in here. And we need to find the entry point for how we get started. So I believe let's take a look here. Where is it? OptiTune client. There it is. So this is the client class. This is the main class that you use to access the API. And I'll show you how you get started. So what we do is we'll say OptiTune client, and then we're going to add the reference to that so it knows what class we're using. There it is. Equals new OptiTune client. So this is the client for accessing the API, but we're also going to need to supply the credentials. So in this case, OptiTune uses basic authentication. And the way you do that here is you say new basic authentication credentials. And this is part of the .NET framework. We can add the reference to that here. The light bulb. So if you hit F12 on this, it'll show you, okay, basic authentication credentials. There's no parameters in the constructor, so it needs a username and a password. Okay, so I can do it in line here. So we'll say username equals, well, let's put a variable to make it clearer. And of course, you'll want to store these securely. You don't want these just checked into your code or anything like that. Because anyone who has these credentials can access your OptiTune instance. So we'll copy and paste that here. And then we'll copy and paste the password in there. So there's the API username, API password. We'll say username is this. And the password for the credentials is this one. And that is it. Okay, so here's the client. This is all it is. And it says, okay, let's create an OptiTune client, the client for the REST API. Here's the credentials. Okay, but now we haven't done anything yet. So let's say we want to call that get my account. So we're going to call this method. So go back here. We'll say OptiTune client dot accounts. Notice how this kind of is parallel to what you see in the REST API. So you say OptiTune.accounts dot get, and then it's me, get me. And you can see this returns a type of account. So let's do that. We'll say account, and then we'll also add the namespace for this. There it is, account. So if this is successful, it'll return an account object. And then we can let's write to the output account username, account.username. So if this program works as we expect, it'll write hello world, then a new line, and then it should write the account username for the API credentials. So let's see what it does. So I'm going to run it. Okay, there it is. Account username is demo user, and that was what we were expecting. But now, say we wanted to show all the computers that are registered in OptiTune. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you look at this object here, these are all the types of resources available. And we'll go down, we'll see that there is computers. And computers, I don't know, this is not showing it right, but let's go back here. So basically you can say for each computer in OptiTune client dot computers dot get all, I guess, because it's an extension method. So this is calling the get all computers method in the REST API. And basically we'll go down here and it's this one, gets all computers in the organization. So we're going to do a loop on all the computers, and we're going to say, okay, let's write out the computer name. String.format computer. And then let's put the computer name. Computer full name. Okay. So now this will loop through all the computers that are available in OptiTune and print out the computer name. Now let's run that. Oh, there they are. So this program printed out the current account username, and then it looped through all the computers and just printed them out. So that's kind of neat. Now let's further enhance it, and we'll say, well, let's see, is each computer online or not? Okay. So how do we do that? That is available, where is it? It's available under agent status. It's called the connection state. So you can supply a computer ID and get its connection state and the last polling interval and some different things like that. So we just want is it connected or not? So we'll go here, we'll say OptiTune client dot agent status dot get connection state. And then we'll put in the computer's ID. So this is it's a GUID, computer.id. Yeah, okay. So this should return the connection state. And the connection status. So we'll say connection status info was that. And then we're going to print out next to the computer its connection state. So we'll say status 1, status dot status. Okay. So it should say, connected, not connected, unknown. Well, let's see what it does. Okay, so it's doing it. Now it is calling the API many times for each computer, so it's a little bit slower there. So you see this one's not connected, this one's connected. We can let's make this a little bit prettier. We can say, let's add some spacing. So we'll do 30 characters left aligned. This is a neat trick with the .NET string output. You can say, I want it to use up a minimum of this number of characters, and it'd be left aligned, being negative. This one could use a minimum of, say, 10 characters. Okay, let's run this. There we go. So you can see it's a very simple program. But it's just demonstrating the basics of how you could call the REST API. And so you would probably, if you were writing a tool for like account creation, say you want to provision a user when they come on board, you would basically call this one to create an account. But that's a basic overview of how the OptiTune REST API works and how you can get started.